I'm going to be discussing the 38th Symphony of Mozart, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. It's often called the Prague Symphony. Unlike other uh, YouTube channels such as Richard Atkinson's music analysis channel, which I'd recommend actually, I won't be able to show you like staves and then pointing out the different notes that I'm talking about. I'm just gonna rely on this guitar, playing the clips and saying, listen to that. That's pretty much what I can offer you. So, this particular symphony, the Prague, is one of the few great musical experiences of my life. I mean, the really at the top there. There are so few things that I could even compare it to that are at its level. Some would be Bach's Mass in B minor, his Matthew Passion, and then Beethoven, his Allegro movements, particularly the Fidelio and Egmont overtures. And in pop music, pop rock music, I'd say the only thing that's come close is Dream Theater's Images and Words. So I'm gonna just begin already. We're gonna hear how it starts. So let's start. Well, this in particular, we actually hear a similar thing in Don Giovanni, which this symphony is actually compared to a lot. Here in the towards the end of the first act of Don Giovanni, there's a particular section. Here we go. Yeah, so you could see that there are some similarities really in the particular notes used, and this symphony is also compared to the overture of Don Giovanni, and for good reason, because like with Don Giovanni, it begins as an adagio, which is just like what the Prague does. The only difference is that in Don Giovanni, it's a D minor chord being played. In the Prague, we hear a similar thing. But that doesn't happen at the very start. That's as the adagio progresses. So that's something like which is actually similar to what happens when the adagio becomes an allegro. So we hear, which is sort of similar to okay, so when it becomes an allegro, we hear that which figures prominently in the middle of this movement actually when during the part where he's doing a lot of counterpoint and using a lot of different motifs heard in the beginning. And that particular thing, we hear a similar line being done also in the Jupiter Symphony in the first movement, and also in the overture of the Magic Flute. But chronologically, this is what came first. So we hear that. Which also figures prominently in the middle. So that particular part where the chords are moving upwards by fourths and flat fifths in one part, that's actually one of the first things that really caught my ear when listening to this movement. It just sounds like the ultimate superhero soundtrack, really. So where it goes. It reminds me a lot of Beethoven's Pathetique Sonata, the first movement, Allegro. So in the Prague, it's something like. And in what Beethoven's doing in the Pathetic Sonata is. The similarity is more apparent when you're listening to the accompaniment also. And this is the development section of the first movement of Prague, where if you're going to be listening for the counterpoint, you have to be aware of the specific motifs being played with. For one thing, there's what I pointed out earlier. So there's that octave thing, which is done a lot in the space of like a minute here. And then there's also what the bass is doing. Something like that. And that's being done a lot also. So you have to be paying attention to those things as they're being done. So we hear some other things going on here. So there's something like. So that's something that was foreshadowed earlier, as I pointed out, the part where. During the beginning of the Allegro section. Okay, so there's a lot going on, and I'm just going to point out mainly the bass that I was playing on rhythm guitar here. So similar to what goes on throughout this movement is a move up by fourths. So like a while ago, there's the, so that's E, A, D, and then to G sharp, and then to C sharp. There's a similarity with what's going on here, where there's an F sharp minor, and then it shifts to F7, and doing an F7 automatically makes it okay to move up a fourth. So it moves to B. And then when you do a B7, that means you're eligible to go up by a fourth to E. And then when you do an E7, you can move up another fourth to A. And that's where Mozart decides to end that, and so he just moves up one last time to D. That's what we were hearing a while ago, but now he's changed that to. So after all of that, it manages to go back to the original beginning of the Allegro, which is like. So he's not just gonna resolve everything just yet. So you could hear something similar a while ago, the oboe, I believe. That's what was done earlier, but now he's doing it. And then he moves it to. And that opens him to going to B flat, which is kind of out there when you're in the key of D major. But Mozart somehow manages. So everything that was happening in the key of A a while ago has moved to the key of D. So a while ago it was. Now it's in the key of D. So that really high part where it goes, it's so climactic, and it really reminds me of the endings of the Egmont and Fidelio overtures of Beethoven. So that's Egmont. Well, the Allegro, the Adagio-Allegro first movement is the best thing about this symphony. We can't just neglect the Andante, which follows. The third and last movement of this symphony, I don't really care for. We could dispense with that altogether. Which is actually, again, another similarity to the Pathetic Sonata, whose third movement I also don't care for. So lots of chromatic stuff there. But really the best thing about the second movement is, well, we're gonna go first to yeah, I love that part where it goes. Which is actually reminiscent of the first movement, like, but instead it's so there are those three notes and a higher note being done, being accented. This to me would be the best thing about the second movement. That's later done in the key of G, which is the key of this movement, but not the key of the whole symphony itself. It's done in G, but by the time it's already spent, Mozart doesn't bother to develop it that much more.